kind of thinking too.
Yeah,
it's
it
supposed
is.
to happen.
Exactly.
And if you do, then you're
Right. Exactly.
Episode 113, Vertical Pursuit. We've had a busy stretch here, so apologize that it's been a couple weeks since I think we had our last couple. You've been crazy busy, and kind of we had a wild stretch there, and we'll play a little catch up first, and then we'll tell you how it's going to kind of factor in or relate in to what we're going to kind of talk about today. So, if you know us or you've been around or you follow Vertical Pursuit on any social media, or you follow either one of us on Instagram, or I think you're on Facebook too, and so is Vertical Pursuit, Pastor Tatlock. We've talked a lot about Cowboy Church, and we've talked a lot about it on the podcast. Now, I know that at times, and I had a friend who's kind of a really funny, cynical, kind of, we'll get to that too, kind of a Christian guy, but he kind of poo-pooed this. What are you guys doing with this whole? I keep hearing you guys say, and I said, it's not the cow. It's not one. What it is, it's representative of what a tool we're trying to use, and so it isn't just about the success of the recent Cowboy Church, which was successful beyond, I think, our expectations, but it's what it stands for. It's what it means. Yeah. And so we'll go back and talk. We have another Cowboy Church, by the way, coming up August 22nd at the Canby Rodeo. But the one that we talked about, we went and did one Easter weekend at the High Desert Stampede in Redmond. It was good, but it wasn't, we hadn't promoted it maybe like this one. And it depends on where you're going to have it, how it can be accessed, who's around there. So the St. Paul Rodeo we did this at, and they say the guys that were running the St. Paul JCs who were running the bullpen where we had this, they said 450-ish people, maybe a few more, and it was 9:00 on a Friday morning. You and I were standing out before and saw people coming down the streets and parking getting jammed up. We're like, whoa. And we didn't know about parking. We didn't have water for people. There's some things we didn't know that we're learning. But what happened and then what continues to happen from that, kind of offshoots of that, and things that are tied in, and connectivity that, connections that were made between people, and both our message and the fact that Justin McKee played a role and got up and just killed it. And I didn't think he was going to give a little 15-minute sermon, but he did.
It's great.
He's the PA announcer for a lot of the big rodeos in the country, and he's on the Cowboy Channel. He's also a pastor from Oklahoma. It really, really hit. And so give me your initial reaction, and then maybe what your reaction and what Cowboy Church in a wider frame of reference meant to you that day.
It's funny. It comes up every day now since then. And the ripple effect has been significant. And on people's personal level lives, a lot of people have been telling me how much it impacted them personally, individually, what God did. But I think what it did, it impacted us collectively. What I mean by that is it was so exciting to see so many people come out and play a part of it. And everybody's like, man, it was like a little mini mission trip we were all on together. Yeah. And everybody was like, gosh, people setting up, people helping do this and do that, and coming together, the community life, just the camaraderie of everybody. And so many people were invested and helped and showed up, and, hey, I can do this. There's so much energy and excitement. People were looking for something to go do that. And so to me, that was a really powerful thing to see of a kind of a collective experience of that. But I'll tell you what, like this is what I am seeing and what I think is significant, because we had a conversation Wednesday night at the Den. The Den is our Wednesday night men's Bible study, and we have, I don't know, probably 50, 60 guys that show up, and many of those guys were there helping or attended. And the interesting thing was, I walk in the Den. We sit down and guys started sharing, man, this is what I saw God do. This is what I saw God do. And I started hearing a theme from people, guys at the Den, people who don't go to the Den, men and women who went to it and said, man, we experienced God's presence. we experienced a freedom that we oftentimes don't experience in church walls. And there was this sense of joy, and like people said God was there. There was a tangible presence of God played out in people being free to worship, the joy, the life, the community aspect of it, the vibe of that. People just said, hey, this was something that was not an event. This was a happening. There was something really special there. And so I don't want to take away from the uniqueness of that, but I see it threaded and tied to something even bigger that God is doing, that I've had the opportunity to see glimpses of in other ways. And so it all ties together for me.
Why do you think, and I don't know that you have an answer to this because you're trying to figure it out, at least from what you said Wednesday, why do you think people felt, because just to describe it a little bit, if you weren't there, and by the way, there is a short video that Tyler Warren did on our Vertical Pursuit Instagram and mine and yours. It kind of shows you a picture of what it really was. It's a covered area of the bullpen of which the JCs run, when that's a whole nother story. I'll get to that in a second. But it's kind of open air, but it's a covered area. And, during the rodeo and at other times during the year, it's an event space. And, at night it's line dancing and a lot of beer and a lot of drinks and wild times and fun. And so we used that space, and there were, and this is what Justin noticed too. You go into the bullpen and they were cleaning it up from the night before a little bit when we got there. So there's a lot of beer cups, a lot of, you can tell there was a party here last night, and that's good. That's fine. But to go from that to then celebrate that next morning, and there's a stage, and we had our, Jake and the worship team and Amanda, it was great. They crushed it. But at 9:00 in the morning on an otherwise pretty quiet St. Paul morning during the happening of this carnival in this little town, all of a sudden this worship music is cranking and the band, the band is going and people are walking in, and we even heard some people say in the little town they heard the music and came to the Cowboy Church service, just kind of walked in. What is going on? So that's kind of paints a picture of what it was. And then it just filled up, it filled the room up, which was really crazy. But why do you think, to go back to my question, why do you think there was this freedom and this difference you were feeling versus, is it because it was an event, not a concert, but a happening? Why do you think you saw the worship as vibrant maybe as it was?
Yeah.
And the camaraderie, both before and after.
Yeah.
Why do you think that was the case?
I think it's a few reasons. One, I think it was the favor of God. Because I don't want to, we talked about this Wednesday night when we hung out afterwards, because guys were talking about it was so different, special, unique, that I was kind of taken aback, because Wednesday night was not the only time I heard that. I heard that from other people. I heard people who went and they would use, literally I heard people say it felt anointed, and that's a church word, a Bible word. So people go, well, I don't know what that means. But everybody's trying to find a word to describe it as something different. And yet the same features happen on Sunday mornings. We had music and a message. I mean, the pieces were there.
Yeah. Turn and greet, shake hand. It was the same thing.
Yeah. It's the same format, right? Just different place. So what's the difference? I think it's a few things. No, first and foremost, I think that we can go back from the first time that Cowboy Church started for us. We're not the only ones to do Cowboy Church.
I was going to say
hundreds of Cowboy churches. I was going to start
and say this is not a novel concept, and we're not reinventing the wheel.
Not at all.
So we know that.
Yeah, but what I do think, to answer your question, is I go back to the beginning when God opened the door for us to go to Canby Rodeo last year, and I want to tie this in because I think people need to understand, if we're going to answer the question, what's the thread here? So we go to Canby last year. Clay walks into the church. Clay says, I don't know who Clay is, and Clay's with the rodeo in the Canby committee there. And through Amanda, we meet, and God just says, hey, ask Clay to do Cowboy Church. I mean, I just met Clay in the lobby. And Clay's on the rodeo committee. I don't even know if Clay cares about God, faith, or I don't know him. Just met him in the lobby. But I heard God say, ask him about Cowboy Church. And Clay just kind of goes, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Well, Clay goes back to the Canby Rodeo Committee and tells them, hey, we're doing Cowboy Church. And one of the women that sits on the Canby Rodeo Committee, I heard, has been praying for 10 years that Cowboy Church would come to that Canby Rodeo. She was just blown. She was like, I've been praying for this for 10 years. And so then we go there and they loved it. And they're like, you guys got to come back, which is why we're going, again. And Dree Warren was a huge part of that.
Yeah.
And his dad, who's also part of that. And so this cascade effect, right? And then he goes to Vegas, meets the folks from Redmond. Redmond says, oh, we want it out here. My whole point in saying this is to answer the question, why was this unique and special? Because God has a plan for it. And when you say God's favors on something, what we mean by that is when God gives you something to do and you obey what he's asking you to do, he will put his power and blessing and favor on what he wants you to do. And I think from the very beginning to now, do you know how many people said yes to this? I think of everybody at the St. Paul Rodeo. I think of all those with the JCs. God used every single one of those people. And maybe they didn't even know what they were always saying yes to.
Yeah.
But because they were willing and open to say yes to what God wanted to do, this was all God. This was all him. He did all of it. And I think there was a series of obedient yeses all along the way because God, and this is we'll get to this, but this is the bigger thread. God is moving outside church walls. And I've been, you've heard me at church, I've been harping on this for probably 2 years. God is moving. We say, yes, he's in the church. Of course he is. But people gather in churches as if that's the only place we can experience God and his presence.
And you check a box.
And you check the box. And then you're on, go to Costco and pick up your groceries. And it's just the thing to do for the day. And people can get stale. And you can sit in there and go through the motions. And I think that's another part of this is people are bored with church. It's you come in, you sit down, you go through the motions, you check the box. But this was on mission. We're going out into the world. The way Jesus said 2,000 years ago when he said, go make disciples, go out into the world. And he promised that he would be with us in doing that. So I thread all of this back. Why was it special and unique? Because this was his plan and purpose to get us out of our comfortable seats in church, out into where he wants to move, where he is moving, where he is working. And let's take the gospel on the road, if you will. And that's why I think it was special and unique.
And we talked about the St. Paul JCs. They run the bullpen, which is this building. And you and I were we had some great help between Justin and Dakota and other guys who helped make this happen because they're JCs. But you and I, about 3 weeks before, we really hadn't talked to any of the higher ups, the guys who really are making this happen. And I was wondering, are they down with this? Are they okay with this? Finally, I contacted and talked to one of them. He said, no, absolutely. Then we get there, and the guy that is I guess the head guy was there with his wife. And I wanted to make sure I called him out in the room to thank him. He waved, and I guess somebody had told me his wife was just digging this. This is crazy cool. And so he made the comment to somebody else, if church was like this, man, I'd be there every week. You know what I mean? That kind of comment, like, wow.
Yeah.
So it got people maybe like you said, who I don't want to say church hurt, but maybe just we talked about spiritual laziness, and I think our last episode, our last couple, it's kind of like it was so different that it got people there who maybe now will take another step.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about what is vertical pursuit, it's this tool. It's this ministry tool. So then this is another arm to that almost was like put gas on the fire.
Exactly.
And that's I think what that's why we've talked about it so much. And I think that's why it's been I don't want to just say symbolic to what we're doing, but it kind of was one of those aha moments of, okay, this is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
This is a culmination of, again, and there wasn't a lot of money spent. This wasn't, it was work, a lot of planning, but not crazy amounts.
Right.
We had somebody who had a space, and we had another event that we piggybacked off, that being the rodeo. We were able to ask a few people to come and help, and the people that, Grace, the worship team, and all the guys that jumped in, the guys that volunteered, and they've done that at every one of these. And now you're hearing more people saying, I want to be involved in this next one, because they're seeing, or they say, what is this? So the tool of that, I think it had the potential, and did, grab people who you just said were maybe a little bored or tired of the normal, or said, okay, I like this event, I like these people, so I want to check this out. Now it's time to take the next step. So isn't that what a ministry tool is all about?
And here's what it is. And that's why I think you set up really well, because people go, what is vertical pursuit? And, it started years ago, 2015, with a discipleship book. We needed a tool to help people understand, be grounded in their faith, and a resource. And then it has grown to become basically an ecosystem, a bridge, a vehicle, if you will. And it mobilizes us as, when I say the church, I don't mean a brick and mortar church.
The people,
the followers. Vertical pursuit is a catalyst. It's a bridge into spaces of the world. We're getting ready to do vertical pursuit basketball camp for kids, and it's like year 9, I think it is, starting this week. We've got kids all from the church's kids, but we got a lot of non-church kids. So vertical pursuit has become a vehicle to disciple and mobilize us to reach people outside of typical church walls. And I think that's what he's blessing that, because it aligns with the mission. I've been thinking about this a lot too. Jesus never said, build the church. He never said that. He said he would build the church. But what he did say is go make disciples. And I think that oftentimes, and as a pastor, I can say this, I think churches get stuck in a rut and a small box, which is get a building, get some people inside of it, and teach them, equip them. And that's good. That is good. But what can happen over time is it becomes an insulated thing where people go there and you go through the routines, but we're not really going back out into the world. We're not really living out the mission that Jesus had. We're the holy huddles, right? And you got a lot of people who are hungry for church that won't go to church. So we got to meet them where they're at. What I love about VP, through the podcast, books we've written, resources, we're going to people. We're not just expecting people to come to us. We're doing what Jesus said with the Great Commission. I will add something else real quick, because this is a bigger thing. Here's the contrast I sit in. This might help people. I sit in a world, a chaplain with the Trailblazers, which is great. I just started this season with the Portland Fire. It's me, another friend who's a worship pastor, Joy, down the street at Rolling Hills. Great church, by the way. Love the guys at Rolling Hills. Alan, the senior pastor, is a great guy. Joy's been a dear friend. So Joy jumps in, and then my daughter, Micaiah. The three of us chaplain the Portland Fire. But here's why I say that. Anybody who walks into the Portland Fire culture, and certainly even Portland, right? And then you go to St. Paul Rodeo. you go, they're kind of two different places, right?
Yeah.
Those are two different places. And that's my point. But here's the thing. This is what I'm trying to zoom out for a moment. I go into Portland Fire. Let me tell you something. It is unbelievable what we see God doing. I mean, unbelievable what we see God doing. And again, most people won't see these headlines because they're going to go on some website and all you're going to see is something else. But we are seeing a hunger. We're seeing, we have 6 girls from the team coming to chapel, which is almost half your team. In fact, this last week, my daughter Micaiah threw a text out to the players and just said, hey, how can we feed your hunger for God more? Because chapels are 15 minutes. They're short. You're in or out. So she throws out a text to the players in our chapel thread. Says, hey, is there anything else we can do? Do you guys need any more resources? Can we get you anything? And she said, if you want, do you want to do a Bible study outside of chapels? Boom, instantly, in. 100% response. So we're getting ready to start a Bible study with the players, and they want to go through the Gospel of John. And I'm like, whoa, the instant response was so crazy. They are so hungry and thirsty to go deeper with God. We're seeing a revival in the sports world globally
sure.
anyways. You can't argue that,
Look at the World
deny
Cup.
that. God is moving in that. And check this out. So I walk into the Portland Fire Arena, and the support that we've gotten, even the president of the Portland Fire gave me a hug at a game and said, whatever you need, let me know. What I'm trying to say is you go then to the St. Paul Rodeo and Redmond and Canby, and everyone on their end, the JCs and the St. Paul Rodeo Committee, there's like a favor of, hey, we really want this. All I'm trying to say is whether it's a extreme different context of a St. Paul Rodeo culture to a Portland Fire WNBA culture, people are hungry for Jesus, and God is showing us we have got to get, those are arenas and stadiums, not churches, but that's where God is moving, and we got to be where he's moving. That's my takeaway.
Well, and this is an obvious statement, and I've said this before. I know I know this is big on your heart because you talk about it a lot. It's Jesus, not religion.
That's right.
And so that's when when we go do something like Cowboy Church or Vertical Pursuit, the thing that people don't want is they don't want religion. They don't want the religious spirit. And so it leads me a little bit into, I started thinking about, I heard this term a couple of years ago when I was listening to an Andy Stanley podcast. And Andy's a prominent Atlanta area pastor, and his dad, Charles, I think just recently passed. So he calls this group of people kind of, and this is, I've said before, my role in this, now I'm not a pastor, you're the pastor.
Well, we could argue that, but
no, but I've said to friends before, I've kind of termed it this way. My role is never, I don't think, to take somebody with a bachelor's degree in Christianity and turn them into master's candidates. That's not what I do. What I like is I want to cast that net lower.
Yeah.
That's what I like. I like to get this, Andy termed them the nuns.
That's right.
Not Catholic nun,
right.
NONES. So this is not a just Andy's term, but I heard it first from him when I was listening. So it's kind of a widely used sociological term for people who are religiously, and I hate the word, unaffiliated. So they're people that when they're asked about their religion in a survey would say none. I think that's where the term came from,
right.
Or atheist or agnostic or, quote, nothing in particular. And so Andy and other leaders have used that term nuns to describe a pretty large and in some ways growing segment of the U.S. population that churches are trying to reach, specifically younger adults. So they're non-affiliated, and they say, and comes up with some numbers now, they make up roughly 23 to 28% of U.S. adults overall, higher among millennials and younger generations, sometimes cited around 35%. So demographically, I thought this was interesting. They tend to be more male and politically left-leaning, which we know, that's clear. Theologically, many are agnostic or apathetic. They don't know, don't care strongly, or don't see a need for an organized religion or a belief in God. They're often not hostile toward faith. They're just detached from it. Therein lies the term nuns. So with a lot of these people, a lot of these guys, if you were to ask them, they say, no, I believe. I know there's a higher power, but I don't know if it's living in denial or if it's, I don't know how to take the next step to start any kind of a walk or relationship. Therefore, maybe I don't know I need it, but I need a caddy on the bag to show me what I should be using for this particular shot, how I can step closer in this. So again, I think it gets confused between atheists, because I don't really feel like there are that many atheists out there. You believe in something, and a lot of them do. They're just, I guess, agnostic, where they just don't understand. But what we're doing, and what I think Cowboy Church did, and what I think Vertical Pursuit does, was we try to be a conduit to awaken some of those souls who are out there, who know they need it, they kind of want it, they live in denial a little bit. Maybe they don't want to take a step to go to a regular church because they remember something when they were a kid, or they see it as being exclusive, and they don't line up with those people. Therefore, I don't think I want to go there. Now, I think Grace Chapel does a great job at reaching a lot of those people, but you don't have to come with a resume. And that's where I think Cowboy Church certainly hit that mark, where some of those guys in there were drinking beer and line dancing the night before and came to church the next morning in the same space. That's a beautiful thing.
You know, I'm chuckling because one of the most consistent things I have heard from so many people was, and across the board, I keep hearing this, those who were there, because that space is a pretty amazing space.
Yeah.
The JCs have done a great job with it. It's a great community, and they do a lot of really good work in the community. So they've created a hub, and, you know, you got beer signs in there, and what people said was, wow, man, I'm watching the worship team, and we're experiencing God, and on the wall behind us are beer signs and lit up neon signs, which you and I are a big fan of those. You've got me one sitting over here, and
to be honest,
in your
I'm
garage.
a big fan of beer too.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Exactly.
Hope that doesn't exclude me, but if it does, I'm in trouble.
That's the point, right? But people were so excited because they were like, I'm experiencing God. This is where Jesus would be.
Yes.
And because I think what happens is the religious spirit creates something, and death. And what do we mean by religious spirit? Well, religious spirit is what you see where there's this lifeless oppression about all this morality rules you have to do to earn God's favor, and then you have to maintain that. And a lot of us grew up in that kind of church.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting, and everybody's judgmental, and you feel this weight on you that I got to be perfect. I got to have perfect church attendance. I got to do all these things and this kind of stuff. And it becomes lifeless because it doesn't have the presence of God. It's all about performance for God. And so a lot of us grew up with that, and it's just negative. And that's where people go, listen, I want God, but I don't want that. Mm-hmm. I'm not an atheist.
Because man gets in the way.
Exactly. Man gets in the way. We created the system, the religious system, and it becomes a barrier. And people go, I went there to seek God, and gosh, God wasn't there. Religion was there. And so what's interesting about that is I think when people come to that time and they're like, oh my gosh, there's no pretense in this space, just his presence. And there's a difference between that. And when people are there and like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, worshiping. I love the beer signs, and it's just we're out here, not in some stuffy, religious, lifeless coffin, if you will, of many churches, because they don't have God's presence. They just have human performance, morality, and the oppression of that. That's the religious spirit, because the religious spirit's different than the Holy Spirit. And I contrast that only because Paul contrasts it. He says the letter of the law is death, but the letter of the Spirit is life.
Yes.
And if we're trying to live the letter of the law with empty moralism and human performance, he says it's death. So I'm just echoing what Paul said in Romans and Galatians. So when people come to a place where it's like everybody's welcome here, come on in. There's no pretense. There's just the presence of God. With people who are hungry for him, seeking him, want to know him, worshiping him, there's life there.
Right. And that's, again, back to the nuns.
Yeah.
So a little bit more on that. So I was looking this up a little bit. So Pew Research and some similar studies, they break the nuns, and these are again, in my life anyway, that's the people I want to get are the nuns. They divide them into three main subgroups. So atheists, and they say 17% of nuns, they fall into the atheist category. So they do not believe in God. 20% are agnostic. They just don't know. I don't know, or I have doubts, which we'll get into in a minute. But the majority, 63%, their subgroup would be like kind of quote, again, nothing in particular. So they may have some spiritual interest or vague beliefs, but no ties to any religion, which I don't think is a bad thing. And I think a lot of the nuns come from Christian backgrounds, but they've become de-churched, if you want to say that. They've drifted away. And that's part of the rise of this, what they call post-Christian culture. I'd call it a post-religion culture, hopefully.
Great. Yeah.
And, you know, there's a lot of factors why these things could happen. Cultural shifts, scandals in churches, which, you know, they get more news than there probably is real, but perceived conflicts with science/modern life, and a general sense that religion isn't necessary or relevant. So when I go back to Andy, and what Andy taught me in this is about the nuns. So he tries to understand, and that's what I am kind of trying to understand as well, the nun's perspective, and then how do you communicate Christianity effectively in a changing culture. And so he argues that traditional approaches, and this gets back to the religious spirit, heavy appeals to old school teaching may not resonate with people who don't already accept the Bible's authority. So we should focus, and I think we do, and you do a great job of this, on the teachings of Jesus and practical relevance and a relational invitation to people. So there may be a hesitancy to believe among the nuns, and I do think that can be described as a fast-growing group of unaffiliated people who, they aren't opposed to faith, but they're disconnected from it. They're open to a conversation, but if this makes sense, they need some reasons that make it make sense in their worldview.
Yeah.
And that can be a key focus, should be a key focus.
I love what you said there. Paul says something that I think, this is VP. This is, if I could put VP in a nutshell, using a Bible verse, and there's several I could use. Paul said, I become all things to all men so I can reach them. Yes. To the Jew, I became a Jew. To the Gentile, I became a Gentile. What did he mean by that? He says, I'm going to meet people where they're at. You have Jews who have their own cultural, faith, religious belief system, and you have the Gentiles who had their own pagan and all kinds of the pantheon of gods and so forth. And he's like, listen, here's what I'm going to do. What they all share in common is what every human was created, which was to know God and to seek God. And then man gets in the way of that. And certainly Satan is a part of that, because Satan creates religious systems as counterfeits. And that's what you see behind the pagan gods. It's also what you see behind so many different religions. They become counterfeit. Satan is a counterfeit. But deep at the core, what Paul was saying, whether they're Jew or they're Gentile, there's a desire to know God, to be known by God, to experience that relationship with God created by him, for him, to know him. And so at the very kernel of the human essence is to know God. And so people get lost in that. And certainly, like I said, Satan creates counterfeits that continue to deceive people away from God, the true one and only living God, as Paul would say. In fact, when Paul was in Athens and in Greece, and he sits there and hears this amazing statement that Paul makes in the book of Acts, when he walks up and they have all these altars and they have all these tribute places where shrines they've made to all these gods. And Paul walks up, and as he looks at the pantheon of idols, he looks over, and you got a god to Zeus and a tribute to him, and Apollos and all these gods. And in the midst of that, Paul says, hey, there's a statue over there with no God but a plaque. And it says, to the unknown God. In other words, amongst the pantheon of the pagan gods, belief was there. Faith was there. It was just in the wrong place. And he says, hey, let me tell you who that unknown God is, meaning that there's something inside of you that you look to know God. And Paul says, let me tell you who he is. That's Jesus. And I love that because Paul said, I'm going to meet you where you're at. I'm going to tell you what you've been looking for. So when I see people who are caught up in everything, they're seeking, they're wandering, they're lost. We have to go, as Paul said, we have to become all things to all men so we can reach them. If I need to meet you where you're at here, I'll meet you there. If I need to meet you here, I'll meet you there. If I need to go to a cowboy church to meet you there, I'll meet you there. If I need to go to an arena to meet you there, I'll meet you there. And this is the same thing with people we work with. You don't even have to go to places. The people are already in your life. They're already there. Where you work, where you live, where you play, where you work out at the gym, your neighbors next door. People are hungry and searching right now. They're not all going to church. And so we have to partner. One more thing, because this is like my passion right now. When Jesus said the harvest is ripe, we're in a harvest right now. I really believe we're in a harvest season. God is awakening people to be hungry and thirsty for him. And if we just sit in our churches expecting them all to come to us, we're going to miss that window. And some are. Many churches are growing. People are coming to church. But I think he's called us to, he said, go. And go out. And so I think that's what we're seeing right now is when we go out, when we open up conversations with our neighbors or coworkers, they're already asking, they're seeking. And I know this is going to be a segue because there's a big topic we want to cover in this episode around people having questions.
Yes.
And I think we have to realize that's a God thing that's happening right now. God is awakening people to be more curious and they're seeking him. They just don't know where or how to find him.
And a lot of people, I think, a lot of the guys I talk to, several specifically, they talk of this imposter syndrome in that because they have questions or even doubts, they say, does that disqualify me? And if it does in their head, they don't want to feel unauthentic, then I'm just going to check out of the whole thing. And when it comes to so a great resource in this, and I just talked about Andy Stanley, and Andy's not perfect. I like a lot of his teaching, and I'm not a scholar by any means. One of the great things I saw years ago was an interview with Lee Strobel. And so I started checking into more of Lee Strobel, and you hear these Christian names come up, and if you haven't researched them, podcasts are a good way to do it. Lee Strobel was on Sean Ryan's podcast, which is massive. It's out there. You can find it. So to give you a little bit of background, and this connects to certain people. So Lee was an outright atheist. So this is a guy, and now just to see what's happened it's incredible. But he was an award-winning legal editor for the Chicago Tribune. So I think he even had his law degree. So this guy was in the mainstream, writing in the media for the Chicago Tribune, and his wife found Jesus. She starts trying to push that to him. And he says, and he tells the story better than I will. He works in legal. So he takes off and does this like a lawyer would in a trial. He says, he says to his wife, give me till Monday. This is like on a Friday. Give me the weekend and I will completely dispel this phony thing you're talking about. So instead, over about 2 years, he puts the evidence on trial. And here's a guy who does this for a living. He is an investigative journalist. And he goes through and he takes, and I don't want to go too far on his story. So he dives into this, and over 2 years, he sees the evidence and he becomes a Christian like in 1981. And then all of a sudden he becomes this massive leader, and this conversion is well documented. He becomes a teaching pastor at major churches and colleges. He starts hosting the what's that TV program, Faith Under Fire. And he now, and here's another, I didn't know this, by the way, and there's a reason I'll bring this up. He's the founding director of the Lee Strobel Center for Evangelism and Applied Apologetics at Colorado Christian University. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
I found that out this morning, and I went, and I highlighted it.
What?
Yes. So Strobel's most famous book is The Case for Christ.
Yeah.
And he's since written The Case for a Creator, The Case for Grace, The Case for Heaven. I think they turned Case for Christ into a movie. But what he did was he presented his personal investigation into his wife's conversion like a legal case. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of people, they want to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely.
They want to hear somebody who took this thing apart, an educated, really smart guy who was an investigative journalist and started off as an atheist, turned into just an absolute powerhouse teacher for the faith. So back to Colorado Christian University, I was thinking this morning about guys who've been big impacts on me, and Strobel clearly is one of those. Mm-hmm. Talk about your connection now to Colorado Christian University, because that popped up this morning, and I went, "Whoa, wait a minute!"
These threads have been happening a lot with VP right now, so it's been fun to see it happen in so many ways. But yeah, we have a book. It's called Vintage Masculinity, and it's a resource to disciple men, and we've talked about it a lot on this podcast. But it's amazing how this thread happened. A dear friend of both of ours, Andy Eckley, just amazing guy. I love that guy. Andy's daughter is going to be going to Colorado Christian University. And so Andy has the book, Vintage Masculinity. He goes out there to visit for I think it was like a president's kind of viewing weekend. You can come out and meet the president. When kids are touring colleges, we're trying to decide where they're going to go. And so then Andy gets home and the Holy Spirit just prompts him to send the president of Colorado Christian University the book, Vintage Masculinity. So Andy sends it to him and he reads it and he's blown away. And the president has a passion to disciple the young men as students on campus. And which again, we're seeing God do that right now. There's something that's happened uniquely amongst young men. It's the fastest growing number back to church is young men. They're hungry. And so, which we sensed that years ago when we knew God was saying chase after men, and
they were the nuns.
They were the nuns, and we also knew that was going to minister to women. That was the other part of it. It wasn't excluding women, because women had been asking, "Where do I find a godly husband? How do I find a godly man?" So these students, these female students at Colorado Christian University, have been asking, "I would love to meet a godly man." So Vintage Masculinity, as we disciple men, it's going to bless women, and so he gets excited and sets up a Zoom call and says, "Hey, let's do this. We want every male student. It's going to be a required reading to go through Vintage Masculinity."
Wow.
And I think I looked it up. I think they have about 1,000 male students that are enrolled there. And then on top of that, they want us to come out there and do a men's conference, speak in chapels, and basically mobilize the men, the young men on campus, to use Vintage Masculinity as a catalyst for their discipleship. And so that's Colorado Christian University. That's happening in November. But that's what I'm trying to say too. I didn't even know that with Lee Strobel. I'm a big Lee Strobel fan too. I didn't know that connection. I don't think that's a coincidence. I
didn't know that. I didn't know it until about an hour ago.
That might actually play in. That's funny you say that. Wow. And I have a Zoom call with the president, the dean of students, and they have a campus pastor of Colorado Christian University in next week. So I'm going to ask them about that, because that might tie into some things we want to do out there with these guys.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Because here's the thing too, is a lot of the apologetic thing is important, because what is apologetics? What is apologetics? And apologetics, it's
a weird term.
It is. So it is a weird term. I tell people, here's where it comes from. When Peter says it in scriptures, Peter says, always be ready to give an answer for the hope that you have. So he says, give an answer. Well, the word answer there comes from the Greek word apologia, which is where people think of apologetics like, oh, an apology. Well, it's not saying I'm sorry for something. A typical apology, the root word for apology is I'm not sorry for something. It's here's the reason for something.
Right.
Like, this is the reason why. It's turned into I'm sorry what I did versus here's the reason for what I did. So apologetics is the ability to have a confidence to give an answer for the hope that we have.
Right.
And so what the discipline of apologetics goes all the way back to the early disciples and what we call the early apologists, who were able to articulate either a reasonable we call it like the forensic side, which is what Lee Strobel did. A journalist, like, hey, there's evidence here. There's strong reason for us to take faith.
And it's funny because his center is called the Lee Strobel Center for Evangelism and Applied Apologetics.
Yeah, I love that. Applied apologetics.
Right.
I love that.
Isn't that cool?
Because you can have all the answers in your head enough that you can be pretty confident in your faith, but the goal is to apply it in a way that helps others be able to have a confidence to take a step of faith. And apologetics and evangelism always go together. That's my degree. My undergrad degree is I have a bachelor's in Christian education with a major in evangelism and apologetics. And that's what I grew up with. And they always should go together. Evangelism and apologetics should always be tied together.
And what I love about the thought about apologetics, the way that Strobel brings it up, is that it invites questions.
That's it.
And that is where, when I have somebody tell me, and I had a guy tell me this a couple weeks ago, who was coming and hadn't been around, and he said, he was almost really, he said, I have questions. I even have some doubts. He said, what does Jesus do with the doubter? He goes, because now I don't feel qualified. And I try to fight these doubts that I have in my mind. And doubts are not inherently a sign of weak faith. And that's a hard thing to tell people, because I think that the old church, maybe, use that term loosely, you weren't supposed to have any questions.
Yeah.
And you certainly weren't supposed to have any doubts. And you can look at, yes, I mean, if you go back to the Bible and Thomas gets the, he's the biggest example. Thomas, in John 20, refused to believe the resurrection without physical proof. And so Jesus appeared to him, invited him to touch the wounds, and then said to him, stop doubting and believe. But he didn't chastise Thomas for having the doubts. And if you go into, and then Thomas certainly believed, but you go into Mark, the father in Mark 9:24 cried, I believe, help my unbelief, which is a question and a doubt. And he's basically saying, I have doubts. You got to help me.
Yep.
And Jesus responded with compassion and healing. Even Peter got out of the boat when prompted, walked toward Jesus, and started to look around, started to get doubts, started to sink. And Jesus even said, you have little faith. And he still saved him.
Yeah.
He did not save him because he sensed doubt. And then even if you want to go in Matthew 28, 17, after the resurrection, some disciples, and we talked about Thomas, and we talked around Easter, there had to be some doubts because they scattered. Oh. So certainly, while Scripture warns against double-minded doubt that paralyzes your prayer or your action, and I think in James it describes it as being a wave tossed by the wind, it does show faith coexisting with honest questions.
Yes.
And that's what I want to tell, like when people come up and they feel disqualified because they have questions or even doubts. And we know that faith is the definition, if you want to say this, is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. That's in Hebrews, and I like that. Yeah. But it doesn't require, I don't think, perfect certainty. Yeah. It's trust amid uncertainty.
Yes.
And that's okay. So, I think it was... what's the book? We Who Wrestle with God. The guy who's struggling right. God, I'm blanking on his name. I'll get it. Dang it! I'm getting old. I lose. Jordan Peterson. That's Jordan's. We Who Struggle.
Oh yeah.
Wrestle. We Who Wrestle with God.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there's a difference between if you wrestle with faith, seeking truth, or unbelief, a rejection of God. There's a huge difference there.
Massive.
Don't confuse the two. I think doubt stems from human frailty, right? I mean, we're broken. We know that. And spiritual dryness, which we talked about in a recent episode. And I think God he's he's patient with us. If you go back, and I've been reading some Psalms lately. Our friend Travis keeps sending me these Psalms that are blowing me away. He reminds us, God reminds us that he knows our frame and remembers we are dust. And there's even other people. We talked about Strobel. I talked about Andy Stanley. Even if you could do any reading on C.S. Lewis.
Oh yeah.
He struggled with doubts, and it's even been mentioned. I was doing some reading on this. Martin Luther, Mother Teresa. There's other people who really struggled and had to work through this. But I think they recognize, as I said a moment ago, it's trust amid uncertainty. And because you have those, don't block those off and think, well, I'm flawed and broken because I'm having doubts and questions. We're supposed to.
Yeah. Well, and see, this is the religious spirit again too, and comes back to this. But you when you texted and said, hey, we should do podcasts on talking about the shame associated with doubt.
Yes.
I think that was really well said. Because so many people I talk to come with their head down going, I shouldn't have these by now. My faith should be stronger. I shouldn't have these. I shouldn't have these things. I talked with a guy. I told you this the other day at Moda Center. One of the employees there. I come out of chapel every game. I've known him. He's amazing. He does security outside one of the locker rooms, and we get done with chapel. We pass notes all through the arena. The same notes we give the players. We just walk through the hallways and people eat them. Oh, okay, do you have those notes? Do you have those notes? And so we sit and talk, and every game, he'll be like, hey, what is this? And what do you think about this? And the Bible says this. What do you think of this? So we always have these great little Bible talks in the hallway. And he said something this last week. I've known him for 3 seasons now. He always has these phenomenal questions and thoughts, and he goes, hey, what do you think about, and he asked me a bunch of questions. Oh my gosh, that's a good question. I go, man. And he goes, I can't talk to anybody about these questions because people tell me I shouldn't question. I don't have enough faith. I just have to have more faith. I shouldn't doubt. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Hold on a second. That's sad and I think he goes to church. So, and not every church is like that. We say it almost every week. Hey, if you have doubts and questions, church should be the first place you go to, or believers in your life should be the first people you could go to with those doubts and questions, because it shows that you're hungry. It shows you're seeking. It shows you're trying to understand. So to me, that's a symptom of someone's hunger. Meet them there. Oh my goodness. And even doubts. Like you said earlier, doubting Thomas, and he gets a bad rap. What did Jesus do with Thomas? He moved towards him. When Thomas doubted, Jesus didn't scold him. He didn't go, he stepped towards him and say, hey, look for yourself. He met him where he's at in his doubts. You brought up the other story, which I think is, you brought up several examples. And I think of the dad that you said, where he says, I believe, help my unbelief. Mm-hmm. And the context of that is this dude is a father whose son was demon possessed. He goes to the disciples of Jesus and tells them, he starts with the disciples of Jesus and says to them, hey, if you can, would you free and deliver my son? And they didn't. They couldn't. That's a whole other story, but they were not able to do that. And then he looks at Jesus, and Jesus responds, well, yeah, all you need is a little belief. And that's when the guy goes, I believe, but actually help my unbelief. And I think that, and Jesus heals the boy. And Jesus responds to that. And I think we need those stories to remind us it's okay to go, I believe, but I still have a lot of unbelief. And Jesus, again, meets him right where he's at in his unbelief, and he meets him in his belief. So I think what we have to do is understand that doubts are different than rebellion.
Yeah.
And you said it the best earlier, was with around uncertainty, trust in uncertainty. And I think that's truly what faith is. Faith is not, I have all the answers. Faith is not, I have it all figured out. Faith is not, I know everything without a shadow of a doubt. That is not what faith is. Faith is trust even with uncertainty.
And then I mentioned Psalms a minute ago, Psalms 13. It's so powerful. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? So you talk about a question, and a doubt.
Yes.
That kind of, so what I think, and this is what I would say, and this is what I've kind of said to this guy the other night who was talking about his doubts. And you've talked about this when you mentioned hunger. I think the ideal response is let your doubt or let your questions fuel you.
Yeah.
So use your doubts to explore Scripture and to pray, or talk with your mentors and friends. And if you don't have any, that's why we always talk about getting in a group, getting in a cohort group. One thing I talked about at Cowboy Church a little bit, and I was kind of trying to get out of the way, but was fellowship.
Yeah, that's big.
And the power of fellowship and what we're talking about doing. And I don't know, and I see some friends who I have lots of friends across the board who most of them are walking in this, some aren't, and they're just isolated.
Yeah.
And if you've got these doubts and questions and you are isolated and you live in denial because you don't want to admit you have doubts and questions, therefore you become a nun by just saying, I can't deal with that. Therefore, I'm just not going to think about it. I got a checklist. I got things to do. I'm busy. I don't have time for this stuff anyway. I don't have time for this Jesus guy. I don't have time to even explore it. And you say, let it fuel you. A lot of people say, I don't have room in my life. I'm busy enough as it is. I'm just going to keep checking off the box every day and just doing my thing. And then years go by and you're still kind of stuck in the same place. Yeah. I know a lot of people like that. So the best thing I can say to do, I don't know where I'd be without the guys in my life who I can bounce questions off. I can go on a group chat. I can text you and say, what does this mean? How do I do this? I keep reading Psalm 46:10, be still and know that I am Lord. What does that mean? How do I be still? Yeah. I've already asked you that 100 times, and you're one of several guys I've asked that question to. That's not a doubt. That's searching. That's searching your mind. That's searching your feeling. That's searching for the Lord. And isn't that what we're supposed to be doing anyway? Yeah,
absolutely. Here's the other thing too is, so I'm talking with this guy in the arena, and he was asking me questions. What do you think heaven's going to be like? And what do you think this and that? We're having all these really great questions. And he was talking about the hunger and thirst for knowledge, to have answers. And I said, here's the reality. God is God because of three things primarily, more than this, but let me to keep it simple. God is omniscient. He's all knowing. God is omnipotent, meaning he's all powerful. God is omnipresent, meaning he is everywhere. He's not bound by space or time. So God has these attributes, and more than that, certainly, but those are three distinguishing marks of God. So God's all knowing. We're not all knowing, but it's in us to know. And so because we're created in the image of God, we are not God, but we're created in the image of God. And because God is all knowing, there is something in us to know. And I think that's what got Adam and Eve in trouble, because the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And so Adam and Eve were tempted to be God. And of course, they were deceived to push into the knowledge of the forbidden. And I think that's where sin can get. So I would tell people, with the hunger of knowing, who you seek to know and is the key to that, right? So because this guy, he's like, hey, he goes, I've just been asking ChatGPT all these questions. He's like, it's giving me weird answers. And I'm like, well, take your questions and doubts, and it's vital who's answering that.
Jeez, so that's a slippery slope.
It's a slippery slope, but that's where people end up in all kinds of places, because they are seeking and they're finding the answers, or again, I say this, the wrong answers in the wrong places. And so we find all of our answers in Christ. But at the same time, while we live on this earth, we will never know everything. And so there will always be a perpetual questioning. There will always be a perpetual, I don't understand, I don't get this. And what goes with that at times is doubts of, I don't know the certainty of this thing. That's why I love your definition, is I can trust God. That's what faith is. I can trust him even if I'm uncertain. So living in a place of doubting, I think, is to be human, but it's also to be alive spiritually, is to seek and to question.
And that's why, I know chat or whatever AI is, and I've gotten some good when I use Grok, or I'll ask I get good answers. I like a lot of it, and it backs them with scripture when it does give me an answer, and therefore I'm like, okay, it's not some digital god trying to indoctrinate me or something, which is the worry up for a lot of people for AI. And again, it changes and gets stronger and bigger every single day. But when I talk about people that's why I throw out the Lee Strobels, and because Strobel, he appeals to skeptics and seekers.
Yeah.
Which I think is really powerful, because if a lot of people want to be honest and admit it, and you got those questions, Strobel gives you evidence-based reasoning, and that's why it appeals. And if you're a practical thinker, and maybe you didn't grow up in a rigid religious system where you don't even allow yourself to have those questions or to have those doubts, and you need, and that's why Strobel, he took it on like a trial.
Exactly. Well, I love this too. Is Jude, the book of Jude, actually literally says, be merciful to those who have doubts.
Right.
And I think too of like my son Jaden, who has friends in his life who maybe don't go to church, but they have really deep theological, spiritual questions. And what I love is he takes the time to listen. He's not threatened by it. And I think that's why some people don't like questions and doubts. It threatens them. And like pastors and churches, and sometimes, or people, they get intimidated by the questions. It's okay to just to say, I don't know.
Exactly.
Actually, that's a great, as a pastor too. I've been a pastor for 30 years, been a Christian most of my life. People ask me, actually, that's a great question. Can I get back to you? Let's dive into that together. Let me see what we can find.
Yes.
That's what my son does, is he hears the question, and then he's like, hey, Dad, these questions are like, and so he goes to try to help. But the cool part is he gets stronger because he's willing to do the work, to research, to study it, so he can help someone else find their answer. But he gets stronger in his apologetics because he's doing the work. So it benefits him that someone's asking, and it benefits them because they have someone to ask, and he's caring enough to say, well, let me meet you where you're at. And this is happening outside of church, by the way. This is just through conversation, sometimes while they're gaming, sometimes while they're having lunch or hanging out. It's really cool.
It's funny you said what you said a second ago, because I think back to college. I wasn't a great student, but I think back to, man, I don't remember many professors. I mean, I just don't. I don't have many memories, but the one I have, I had to take a science class. I don't know if it was chemistry. I can't remember. I was a journalism guy, so I didn't have to take much science or math. Thank goodness. That's why I went to that. But I remember he had this funny, he looked like Tom Smothers. I still remember that. Exactly. Even talked like him. And when he would get asked a question, somebody'd say, he'd go, I don't know. He goes, let's figure this out together. This is about science. But I loved, and the way I remembered him, and the reason why, and what made such an impression on me, is because if he didn't know, he said, I don't know, but let's figure it out. And then the class would, we'd take an exit, and we'd try to answer that question. And he didn't try to have all the answers. I loved that. And therefore, I think you're exactly right. And if you have friends or people who you are leading a little bit, and if you're trying to be a disciple maker, and people don't think you have to have some big answer. Your best answer sometimes is like you just said, I don't know, let's find out together.
I think of you all these years that I've known you, we joke earlier about you said, I'm not a pastor. Well, we're going to debate that. You may not have that as a title, as a job somewhere, but you function in what the Holy Spirit has done in you, that you have that shepherd pastor heart for people. You also have a strong evangelistic heart.
I don't want to be called a pastor because the Bible says you're judged to a different standard. I don't want to fall into that category.
That's certainly true. That is definitely true. I don't want that.
Your line for judgment is a different line than mine. I got the fast pass, hopefully. I just go around. That's so true. You're in a longer line.
That is so true. You
get pulled aside for additional screening.
The interrogation room off to the side.
Yes, you get to go in the separate room.
It's like when you're going through TSA and everybody's going through, and you're going through, and no, this guy, go pat him down.
He's a pastor, so you got to go to this area. Barrett, no, he can go right through. He doesn't. He's just a yutz. He doesn't know anything. He can go right in. Tatlock, here's a special area for you. Get undressed. There'll be somebody in here in a minute to search you.
Awesome.
It's funny, but I do think about that sometimes.
It's funny, but it's probably
but the Bible warns you.
It does say
if you're
that.
going to teach.
It does say that you're held to a higher account. It's so true.
But I think the basic point in a lot of this is, and I've tried to say this to somebody, and probably not very eloquently, doubt does not disqualify you.
Yeah.
So don't think that,
Yeah.
and don't avoid it. Don't avoid the doubt, and don't avoid the questions, and then don't avoid people who you were hanging out with or different groups you're going to because you feel guilty that you have doubts.
But that's where I was going earlier, why I was bringing up you and the evangelist pastor thing, because you, as long as I've known you, you have this way of making people feel very comfortable with you to ask. And people can, because some of those doubts that people have come from deep places of pain. So, so when someone says, hey, I have these doubts, well, oftentimes it gets traced back to, why did God allow this to happen to so-and-so in my life, right? And you're like, I don't know. I don't know that answer, but I will tell you, and this is what I've seen you do, because you've had people in your life that have gone through hard tragedies and things, and they ask you, and you have always made yourself accessible. And I think people see the humility in you, but they also see what you do have with the Lord, and they want that. So you have become their pastor in many ways. They go to you because you have given space. You're authentic and genuine with them and what they're trying to figure out. You meet them there, and you've had people in your life that have gone through hard things. And that naturally raises questions like, well, where was God in this? And why did he let this happen? And why is this? And this prayer's not answered, and all those sort of things. And you've been great to be with people and even go, actually, I don't know those answers, but you were still with them in it. And I think people need us to be with them in the doubts, not just there to give them answers with their doubts. I think those two have to go together. I can give you presence before I give you answers. You've done both of that, because then it allows them to feel comfortable with you, not judged, to be open and go, I don't know why this, I don't know if I believe this, I don't agree with this, this doesn't make sense. And they're trying to sort that stuff out. And you've done a great job with people of giving them those spaces. And then over time, you've been able to plant and replace some of those questions with some answers. And it's given them like, okay, thank you, I needed that. And it's helped. It's like you said earlier, we need a caddy on the bag. That was such a great statement. Yeah, so good. And you've done that with a lot of people. You've been like, hey, let me help you navigate the course of life with bunkers and water hazards, and let me kind of help you through this.
Here's the right club for this shot.
Exactly.
It is hard, and I think probably some of the reason. I mean, I don't mind answering with I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people from the outside would view a mature believer as being on a constant emotional high. And they don't understand that people who are believers, they have their ups and downs as well, and they have their questions. And especially when they're hit with, why did this happen? This makes no sense. I have that all the time. I constantly stop and have to go, why in the world? I'll ask the Lord, why did you do that? Why did you allow that? I don't see the reason for that. I know, I mean, I'm yielding to his authority and his power, but I am at the same time going, why'd you do that? And that's a question.
Yeah.
And it sometimes you can doubt the outcome of things. And I don't think that should necessarily disqualify you. And don't run from that. Even if I think that if you've been brought up in a legalistic church with a lot of rules that show you, and I think that's why people end up as nuns in many ways, is because they look back and go, I'm disqualified now because I shouldn't have these. Therefore, I'm just not going to think about it, but I'm not going to go there. Now, I don't not believe, but I can't play in that league anymore because I'm not qualified to.
Yep. Yeah.
Cowboy Church number 3 or 4 or whatever is coming up August 22nd.
August 22nd.
That'll be in Canby. We'll have more information on that one coming up because, I mean, some of the stuff we don't ever really know exactly. We just kind of trust and go and see, it always works out. So not like we don't plan. It's just some of the stuff we don't know. But we hope you go, and we look forward to that one. What do you have planned for that one? Anything special?
Yeah, I think I would say this is, we had 460, 450, something like that in St. Paul. And I think that everybody if you're listening and you came, you know what we're talking about. And sometimes it's easier to invite someone to something
Yeah.
And so I would tell you, if you're listening and you came, please partner together for their sake, for our sake, for God. Invite someone and watch them be blessed. And if you haven't had a chance to come, then please, we would love to see you there. And we know this podcast is way beyond our region. So those who are living in other states, you're always welcome to get on a plane and come out. But you could be praying for us on that weekend. If you can't make it, be praying that it'd be a great, great weekend.
And it's not every day you can go to Cowboy Church and then go grab a corn dog and a beer.
That's a great day right there.
That is a great day. We love you. We thank you for listening. We'll see you again on the next episode. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast, comment, or message us, and check out our website at verticalpursuit.org. Download the VP app and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.